Like he said, I'm Vince Fowler. Most of you probably know Wayne Levin, or too many people come up to me and say, oh, you're one of Wayne's. Yeah. I feel like that. There we go. OK. Boink. So first, we're going to talk about process screening. If you haven't used process screening, it came out in Jump 13 during trichodecaphilia year. It's awesome. If you've ever, like I've had a dashboard that literally has 1,000 control charts on it, and engineers spend an hour every morning just looking through the control charts and doing stuff. This basically summarizes all that, so you only look at the control charts that you care about. I'll just show a real quick example of it. So this is just a data table. So instead of me going through and scrolling through all of these control charts to say which ones I want to look at, I can just sort, OK, well, I want the ones with the, well, probably lower CPK. And I can just go, OK, cool. Well, these ones I care about. And you can just select them. You can right-click, and you can just get control charts for them. And it gives you the control charts for the ones you have selected. Basically, it's a really easy way to drill down. And a lot of this presentation is going to be a love letter to whoever wrote it, because I love this platform. Yeah. Oh, crap. Yeah, cool. It also has some other neat gadgetry, and I'm running this in 15. So the process performance graph would basically let you see, hey, what groups are, unstable or whatever. And now because of 15, you can see little graphlets to see, oh, maybe I can glean some more information about why this is unstable. The shift graph, this isn't a great data set to show it, but normally you can say, OK, well, something's a 5 sigma outlier of shifting up from one group to the next. And it's useful, just, yeah, not a great data set for it. Where'd you go? So what KLA came to us, and they said, hey, we want to have this style of report, but our script is getting unwieldy, and it's getting very, very slow for more and more rows. So I tried running one of their data sets. I stopped at 16 hours because I was tired. But it just ran, and as you can see, it's like an exponential problem. Because they were plotting all of these scripts, like all of these control charts, they were doing all the plotting, and they were doing a report like this for every single group, where they wanted the control chart, some distribution and capability stuff. They were doing the variability charts with custom variance component stuff, and they were just foring through them very brute force. Yeah, it was a nightmare. They also wanted to do, process capability doesn't natively have the ability to do Levey Jennings Control Charts. At least it didn't in 14 when I checked. It might in 15, because they like to make all the work I do irrelevant. They didn't like Short PPK. They wanted it to change to CPK because it matched distribution platform, which also changed this year, because now that matches PPK and the distribution platform's updated, which is awesome. And yeah, the custom variability analysis. So we'll look at some comparisons. They wanted to be able to talk about and separate what was a process X factor and a measurement X factor, because all of this was to do spec validation. So they wanted to say, hey, is this tool good for this tool, and does it have to do with the part, or does it have to do with the measurement itself? I'm just going to assign defaults, and this is just fake data that KLA uses as test data. So they didn't want the within sigma. We got rid of that. We did a lot of like just hiding and changing, but we also added, for instance, we added the CPL, CPU. We calculate a P to T ratio. And all of this is dynamic. So if you change it in the, if you start excluding points, it will change it in your summary table for everything. Yeah. So I imagine you'd want to look at, okay, well, what's my low CPKs? I want to graph, well, that's high CPKs. I want to graph these ones. You can still do all the native functionality with it. All we basically did was embed the process screening to use as a drill down platform to be able to plot the other things that we wanted while still using this as effectively a summary table. So if we just plot, yeah, it makes the reports, it sends in the variance components that you get from each of these, and they should match the data table if they say so. They wanted the ability to add, and this is more on this report, if you wanted to say, okay, well, I want 2 sigma, you can add the 2 sigma to the graph or the, okay, this is why I should have run in Jump 14. I wrote this in Jump 14, so we'll run it there. Not big class. Doink, doink. Doink. Let's try this again. Hopefully I don't get egg on my face. Okay. So now you can see it plotted the 2 sigmas by each group. It also added in, you know, your 2 sigma here if you're interested, and then you have the option to add it either place, but for the most part, and all this was just done with JSL, and basically embedding process screening and then looking through the parameter tables as we did clicks to do it. They also had some other plots that they wanted where they're just like, okay, well now show me the LSLs versus the actual reported value that you're getting. They wanted you can standardize it. And this was actually, I think Mark Sharp showed me how to do this on the Jump community. So if you have questions, go to the Jump community because tons of people there know what they're doing and it's awesome. We have the ability to just plot CPKs by P to T ratio. And I'll just show the multi-factor. That is, for the most part, what this app does. Now, we made it an add-in. It's actually, do I have this installed already? No. They actually have 3 different versions of this. One to do all spec validation, one to do no CPK, basically don't put in spec limits, and they wanted them separated, so we did what they told us. Oh, I wanted to show that too. We made it so you can just save as images, let's desktop, new folder, some images. Select folder. So now if I go to the old desktop, because she wanted to put these in PDF, we talked to her about, because we can kind of save stuff to PDF as is, but she didn't want us to do that. She's like, no, I'll just put them in my OneNote and then have them automatically save that way. Not what I want. Yes, talked about all that. A couple of the problems were getting the row state handlers. I don't know how much scripting everybody has, but with the row state handlers, the way that you have to have them basically be a global variable to work, and we needed this to work with, basically I need to be able to run it as many times as I want, have simultaneous runs and not have them run into each other. And they didn't want us to use namespaces, so we had to figure out a way around that. When we did so one of the things that we noticed that was just slow in their script was they were getting the variance components. If you go to, they were getting variance components through this, and then calculating them to put them basically in the process factor they wanted or the measurement factor. We found that it was slowing it down for whatever reason, and when we got them through fit model instead, it sped it up immensely. No idea why. But when you get it through fit model, it doesn't report the same way if variables are confounded. So she was just like, well, this doesn't look exactly like that, so we can't use it. It took some convincing. But we got it. Sorry, Wayne yells at me all the time because I just make noises randomly. You know it's true. So for mostly the conclusions, we just added a bunch of stuff using process screening as our front end to down select things because it's just blazingly fast. It's awesome. And because, let me show one more thing real quick. Run that. Sample data. Multi-vector, is that the one I want? Well, either way. If I would group, how do I group this? Let's put, I don't know, put load in there, sure. So obviously, we can put, when I'm saying by, it's not the same by that jump uses just because it's like, hey, how are we using these to group the variables? So obviously, we wrote it dynamically, so you can just put, basically we wrote it as a platform. So you can put anything in and it will spit out some numbers with some stuff, whatever. Why do I keep doing that? Yep, because did it because it was way faster. We ended up doing pretty differently with them. We don't see that exponential curve that we have. And that's actually not just the process screening. That includes making the report, basically selecting all of the by groups and still plotting them. And we're still, it took 80 seconds instead of 16 hours, basically. And that's pretty much all I've got. I don't know how much time I actually took, so. Does anybody have any questions? Not really? Fit model was a big one. Oh yeah, sorry, the question was, what was the key? I assumed you mean to making it faster. Well, they were doing just a big for loop and then they would make the summary, then they would go through, find it, and their finding wasn't very optimized. The fact that they were using variability plot and they were doing one at a time, like they didn't use any by groups for anything. They were, yeah. So when they were doing it, they were doing it very brute force. And for the most part, as soon as I showed her process screening, she was like, yeah, we needed a down select tool anyway, because I don't want to actually look through. Because they would seriously run this on thousands of reports, save as images, put it into a PowerPoint, and send to their boss. And that, if anybody sent that to me, I would be like, I don't care. I'm not going to read this. TLDR and all that. The other big one was probably Jump, so one of the things I really like about Jump is you can send commands to lists, and if the platforms are, if it's all the same platform in the list, it'll just give you a list of the returns. That was a huge one. So getting variance components took, yeah. So basically I just had 2,000 fits, take the whole list, send it instead of foring through it. It sped it up immensely. Anybody else? Yeah.
How are you able to use different scripting functions? Like, were you able to take either functions you've written from other scripts and use it in this script, or are you able to take functions you wrote for the script and maybe use it in the future?
Yeah, actually, so everything that we build at Predictum, we try to generalize it as much as we can to use it again, and we actually build on, we call it the Predictum System Framework. So we build all of our functions, and if it has a use anywhere else, we basically just throw it in that. So we have a, 10 years of libraries of stuff we've written before. And I wrote, I don't know, probably like 15 helper functions to specifically work with process screening. If you haven't tried new custom function yet, it's awesome. It came out in 14. It has to use a namespace, but it can use the global namespace. So you can kind of do that, but it basically lets you put it in the scripting index. So you can have examples, you can have your little hoverlet, it'll turn blue on your own custom functions. We found that that's really helpful, just especially hiring a new developer and just being like, hey, you don't know any of our functions, but they're all in the scripting index, just like you would look at anything else in Jump. So, yeah. Yeah, so the question was, for the new custom function, does it have the help? Does it have examples? And yeah, you can send in prototypes, you can send in the parameters, you can send in result types. You can do stuff with the formula depot as well, to where, actually, do I have it installed? I might have not installed it. Yeah, I have it installed. Let's just look at it. We have Jump, right? PS. I should probably, so like, it'll say, my documentation isn't the great at this, but it makes a copy of a namespace, and then it has an example that you can run, just like anything else, if I just look at Predictum. So like we have all of our logging, all of our custom logging in there, we have all of our stuff in there, actually, so. Yeah.
Regarding the timing and variability, do you know if they had tried to use the preference to exclude the Bayesian variance components by chance?
I didn't look at that specifically, no.
Okay, because that can really increase the time if there's...
Oh, no, I think they were doing, I think they were just doing REML specifically.
Okay.
I don't remember, I'm sorry.
Okay, because that might really help.
Okay.
Try that option.
Yeah. I think I had just asked Jump, I was like, hey, do you know any other way to make this faster if all I'm doing is actually getting the variance components? And they're like, yeah, you can definitely do it in fit model. And it was super fast, so.
So in your presentation, which I did not understand, what is the new additions in the process screening platform in Jump 15?
I think Jen Fang did
Whatever
a...
you showed, mostly I saw in process Jump 14, correct, isn't it? Or
yeah, this was all written in Jump 14.
Okay.
So I didn't have any of the new features. Like I didn't go to Jen Fang's thing. I think it was on process screening. It might have been on FDE. But she showed some stuff of the improvements, and I don't know them well enough. I only installed 15 the other day, so. I do know the graphlets and the hoverlets are super useful already for me. But yeah. Anything else? Sorry, I just hit a mic. Cool? Yeah.
The envelope of the spec limits that you're showing there, you know.
The envelope of the spec limits.
Yeah, I don't know what you call it, but is that just another column that you have, where you had the red spec limit for every
Oh, yeah. So if you haven't, let me just actually go into the process screening proper. So yeah, I definitely have an LSL, USL, because we wanted to kind of mimic how Control Chart does spec limits, and it was under the assumption that the spec limits wouldn't change that much point to point, because we didn't want to run a time series. So we just ran basically Graph Builder, nested however many levels you tell it to nest, and then just plot the spec limits above and below.
Right, but is it that, do you change the jitter so that it appears as a line?
Oh,
Is that how that works?
that's not the one I want. This is the one I want.
Yeah, you know, like, is the jitter is,
I did it. I didn't set.
okay.
Yeah, so I actually set the jitter limit explicitly in it. Yeah, and just to make it wider and basically cover the space. Yeah. And if you haven't played with, come on, give me my process screening. Group by, sure. I don't care, don't care. One really cool thing that I like is, so if you know how, instead of saying, okay, my spec limit is one thing and one column property, and I think they updated this in 15 so you can do multiple column property, multiple spec limits for the same column. I'm not sure. But you can use the limits table, and you can use the limits table self-referentially, meaning that I can just select it, and it has the USL and LSL in it, so it will use the spec limit on a per point basis, basically. So you can be like, okay, well, here's my spec limit for that, here's my LSL, USL, and now my spec limits are in show spec limits. Where are you? Nope, nope. Show capability, spec limits. I don't know if it uses the first one or the last one, but it does have the spec limits in there now. And I find that super useful. Okay.